Ooh boy, this article sounds really interesting. It's called Unaffordable Housing Leaves People Homeless, Not Funding Cuts by Kyle Sweetland. The Trump administration recently announced it will cut proposed funding for permanent housing for the homeless in 2026 from about $3 billion to $1 billion. This has left nonprofits worried that homeless counts will start climbing again. Ann Oliva, CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, says that these changes could be disastrous for people without a place to live. HUD's new funding priorities slam the door on them, their providers, and their communities, she said. Make no mistake, homelessness will only increase because of this reckless and irresponsible decision. But such arguments are misplaced and distracting. They ignore what keeps people from falling into homelessness in the first place: housing affordability. Housing unaffordability. These programs merely create the expectation that government assistance intended to be temporary should become permanent. Research conducted by both my colleagues and me shows that from 2007 to 2017, annual funding for homeless programs rose from about $2 billion to $5 billion at the federal, state, and local levels. However, funding increased dramatically leading up to and then during the COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency measure under the American Rescue Plan Act, shooting up to nearly $16 billion in 2022 and remaining elevated since then. But this dramatic funding increase did not correlate with the decrease in homelessness. In fact, the funding went up, and so did homelessness to an all-time high. States with some of the largest homeless populations in the country have seen similar results. New York and California, for example, each of which dedicated over $30 billion between 2007 and 2024, saw large increases in homelessness over that same period. On the other hand, states like Texas and Florida, which dedicated less than $5 billion, saw significant reductions in homelessness. These findings hold up both in terms of total funding and in terms of funding per homeless person. So if it wasn't funding, what would explain the divergence in homelessness across the states? Research points to the fact that states like Texas and Florida built significantly more homes, whereas states like New York and California did not. The connection is further backed up by research by Greg Calborn and Clayton Aldrin, who show in their book Homelessness is a Housing Problem that structural factors such as high housing cost and low housing affordability explains higher incidences of homelessness more than individual factors such as poverty, race, mental and physical health, substance abuse, job loss, and family breakdowns. In places like California and New York City, housing costs are too expensive for many people to afford a home larger than what they need. They desperately need to build more homes and lower the cost of living. Research shows that rent growth increased the most in lower income communities amid our nation's current housing shortage, but regions that built the most homes saw the lowest rent increases. Other research shows that building more homes brings the cost of housing down for lower income residents, even if these new homes are expensive market rate homes. Simply put, building more homes drives the cost of housing down for lower income residents, making it less likely they would be displaced. There are several less visible reasons why building more homes helps reduce homelessness. One theory posits that building more homes lowers the cost, which leads to people living in homes large enough to have spare bedrooms. This gives people who would otherwise be homeless an opportunity to remain housed in situations that may be imperfect, but still at least provide a roof over their heads. For example, someone who loses a job and can no longer afford an apartment could live in a friend or a relative's spare bedroom. While the number of homeless has risen across the country, we are not without the means to address it effectively. My organization, for example, has drafted state-level reforms that could increase the supply of housing and lower the cost of doing so. By taking steps like these, states can enable making homes abundant and more affordable to Americans, and as a result, they can remain focused on what is really going to lower homelessness. Well, I am inclined to agree that we should build more homes. We know this, that the housing cost increases are due to high demand. When there are an abundance of people and a shortage of places, these filthy bastard landlords can get away with charging $2,000 a month for these pissant 1-bedroom apartments, and it's just a vicious cycle that unfortunately the people in any given area are inclined to put up with. Now, you have people like Jem who will say, oh, just move out of California, just move out of New York. But if you're already struggling financially, you're not going to have the money to just get up and drive from CA to wherever the hell these people are claiming that you should go instead. So it is a very vicious cycle, and it's why, as I explained before, poverty It's got a lot of factors, right? But one of the main things has to do with wages in proportion to the cost of things. So if someone is working, because they always talk about, raise minimum wage. If someone's working a part-time job where they're making 300 a week or 400 a week, and you tell them, hey, you need to go and rent this house, this one bedroom apartment that is $2,000 a month. Well, the only solution they have is to either try to get a second job on top of the one job that's got hours that fluctuate all over the place, which basically makes it impossible to, or much more difficult than it should be to get two jobs on top of each other, or to try and get some roommate. Basically, they are set up to fail by how expensive this stuff is based off of what amount of money they make each month. And that's why I told the story of how I know a lot of people and have seen this, where they will go and lease a car for 200 a month, go to work, sleep in there, and then keep going to work, and just that's how they cut the cost down. Because even if they're only making 1,200 a month or whatever, it's still enough to cover other things that they have to pay, as opposed to pissing out $2,000 for these little itty bitty apartments. The housing cost cuts, I don't like. I don't like. This is my problem with this stuff. Do I think there's a case to be made that just spending more and more money on the homeless is going to make the issue be solved or no longer a problem? No, of course not, because we don't know what the money is going to. We don't know what those bureaucrats are doing with it. But again, the issue is that when they cut stuff like this, and then they keep funding all these other goddamn countries and different wars, it's like, get out of my face. Like, why every time there's something that helps people or is supposed to help people, it gets cut, but then the stuff that has nothing to do with any normal person, it either stays the same or gets raised, like the military budget. But going back to what this article was saying, because I find the whole discourse around housing costs and the lack of homes very interesting. You have many different landlords that employ politicians and other nefarious characters to start protesting and being against the construction of homes, because this house doesn't have open field. This they put up all types of arbitrary BS to get around building more homes, because those landlords know that the more and more and more houses that get built, the value of their crap is going to go down. So yes, I think if my state and New York had more homes being built, just constantly, consistently, no rules about, this needs to have a backyard, or this needs to be in this location. If they just started building stuff nonstop every year, homelessness would decrease significantly. And this is like what I find so frustrating. And this would be a good point to end here. I've said this number before, and I'll say it again. Over 60%, it's either 60 or 64, but a majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And you can sit here and you can talk about, this person bought this person bought that. But a good chunk of the reason for that is because the basic necessities that a person needs to survive simply cost too much when people are able to make so little in terms of what the jobs are offering. If you're trying to just just think about this. If I, as an unassisted person, we're just looking at, okay, I want to just pay for essentials every month, right? Rent over here could go anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500. If you're looking at a phone bill, right, it's like $100. Food's a few hundred a month. Gas is probably around $200 a month. And it's like, you sit here and you think to yourself, man, look, like if even again on a part-time job, if the cost of rent was either cut in half or just not a factor, things would actually be kind of affordable. If you, along on top of like having a job that is either giving the consistent part-time hours or a full-time one, which all these employers, I said before, they'd rather slit their wrists than have somebody work full-time because they don't want to give you any benefits. But it's so frustrating to think about how, if you just want to pay for basic things needed to survive, that's $3,000 a month. That's over $3,000 a month. When many of these jobs, you'll be lucky if you make that in 2 months. And that's why I said I know a lot of people who, if they're not, I mean, I said before that, like, I don't even know anyone who's under 40 that lives by themselves. Like, everybody's living with mom and dad, or they have a roommate or roommates, or And I said this is another subgenre, right? They go and they get a car and sleep in there, and then they pay for all their other stuff. But I guess I'm just saying that it's so sad to think about how the United States has, like, people who live here. A lot of these Americans, a lot of these, like, they have really convinced themselves it's normal to just piss out a fifth of 10 grand every month just to have somewhere to go to sleep at night. Because as I said earlier, I look at all the other, because I'm a single person, I don't have any kids, I'm not married, but as an example, I give of just, these are my monthly fees, and all of my monthly fees together are still not even half of what the rent costs would be here. And that's my point of, like, if rent wasn't so expensive, if jobs were actually hiring and not trying to get rid of somebody after 2 days or use them once a week, any other BS, uh, things would be decent. But we're facing what is going to be the dumbest recession ever, all these layoffs. And I wish the article this guy would have pointed out, hey, another reason for that homeless population is the frankly trash, disgusting, filthy, worthless U.S. job market. And you got people sitting here and applying for 100 jobs just to get one interview. This stuff is nuts. So I believe, and I've said this before, I think most Americans are set up to fail. If they go to college, they have to pay out thousands of dollars that they often don't even own. Then they have to hope and pray that piece of paper gets them a good job. If they're working for one of these different psychotic employers, they have to hope that person doesn't try to replace their job with a machine or try to get them out of there after 2 days or any of the other nonsense to save money. And it's sad because, like, people just want to live. Like, that's it. And it's a real slap in the face when you're looking for work, right? And you can't find anything and people call you lazy, because it's like, why would you apply for hundreds of jobs every year if you didn't want to work? What would even be the incentive to do that? And it's really a slap in the face when someone would love to live in an apartment. It could literally be a singular room with a window and then maybe something like a closet or something. And they can't do that because it's so goddamn expensive, and the jobs pay so little or give so few hours that it's not possible. They have to worry about paying for all this other stuff, before they'll give some jerk landlord, right, some crazy amount of money for their rip off box, as I call it. So it's all set. The final word, I don't think we should cut things for the homeless, right? But there is a point to be made of, they need to build more and more and more apartments and housing units just nonstop. That should, and it's really, like, I'm not even trying to be funny. Landlords, like the ones who are actively sitting there and trying to stop homes from being made, they're among some of the sickest bastards in America, because they're literally, to protect the cost of their property, trying to ensure that people have so few places to live that they'll put up with these extremely high costs that a lot of us can't afford. So that's disgusting to me.